Okay.
All right. Thank you so much for joining today. We have a special episode. I'm here with a special community activist. She's a community activist here in the upstate New York area. She's done a lot for the community, especially for the young Black youth and the Black community in general, and helping with people learning about new initiatives, new resources, and things for the Black community to become more successful. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you guys for joining for this episode, and I would like to welcome Miss Corinne Kirk. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you, and thank you for that wonderful welcome.
Absolutely, absolutely. First of all, I want to thank you so much for giving me your time, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about a few issues. Something that I do like to do with this channel is to address the problems and situations within the Black community and how we can come together and so forth, and try to come with solutions and also address some of the challenges as well. So I'm going to just ask you a few questions about your background, what you've contributed to the community. And I think it's super important to highlight people like you that have been so instrumental in making change here.
Thank you. I will try to answer the best I can.
Sounds great. Sounds great. So we'll start with the first question. So, what motivated you to volunteer and become an activist?
Um, so there were a few different things that happened in my life that let me know that I was either part of the solution or part of the problem. And so that kind of moved me to action. One of the biggest things I'll say that really started um, activism or just civic engagement. When I was in high school, the governor at the time, um, to excuse how underfunded schools were, said that New York State should only be responsible for funding students up through eighth grade. So that would mean that after eighth grade, so all of high school, would then become an additional cost for families, and they would have to pay for their children to attend. Um, and as we know, with an eighth grade education, there's no way that somebody, well, I'll say highly unlikely, that someone can create and sustain a life of quality, right? So at that time, I was a junior. And so what that would have meant was for my senior year, right, for me to be able to complete high school, my mother, who was a single mother, and there was myself and my cousin also living, and my sister living in the home at the time. So now my mother would have had to pay tuition just for me to finish high school, to move on, to go to college, or to move on to anything else that I was looking for and planning to do. And that was just not feasible. I thought it was absurd. And so I got involved with an organization called the Alliance for Quality Education. And I started going to Albany, the state capital, and learning more about state funding and how schools are funded, and learning about lobbying and advocating for those who are most in need. And so that's really how it began. And that's what motivated me. And I've kind of been involved ever since then.
Thank you so much for that. I do want to give a congrats to you, as I know that you've recently been promoted to a senior leadership position within the within the school board. So I do want to, say congrats on that. And you're definitely a prominent figure within our community.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So the other question that I have for you still kind of focuses on your background and how you, contribute to our community. So what do you think Black people need to do in order to be successful in today's economy? We're in a COVID economy where certain jobs are dissipating, they're no longer available. What do you think that we may need to do, especially within the East Coast, New York region, to become more successful as a stronger community?
Um, so, of course, there's no one answer that will fix everything. There's no like panacea. But what I do believe in wholeheartedly as an advocate for public school, I think education is really important. So we need to make sure that everyone has access to that and is able to finish the public education system up through at least high school, right? And so that's one thing that's really important. And so that also includes training so that they are prepared to either go out into the workforce or go on to higher education. That being said, I also really strongly believe in entrepreneurship. Um, since George Floyd, a lot of people in this community and all across are looking to really support Black entrepreneurs. We are geniuses. We are very creative. And so we have many different businesses that are already in existence. Some have blossomed, which is great. But that's another thing that we can really do to help one another and help ourselves, right? So supporting Black businesses, helping entrepreneurs to develop, taking those skill sets that we have and monetizing them. So that's another thing I think we can do.
Yeah, education and entrepreneurship are definitely two super important things. And I also would like to add to that. I'm glad that you said those two things. You know, knowledge of self, history is important as well too, because then people will know, the history of where they come from and kind of why certain things are going on today, and so forth. So that's definitely a good starting point. Okay, so you mentioned George Floyd, and there's a lot of changes that are going on right now. For example, in Minnesota, there was recent initiatives and policing changes, and the federal government is talking about making it on a national level in America as far as certain policing tactics that unfortunately have been predatory toward people of color in America. So there's changes and so forth. With that said, what do you think are some positive changes that could be implemented within the federal government on a national scale to help people of color, mainly Black people, with being able to stop being assaulted by certain cops, some cops, and also you know more likely to get targeted for drug offenses and things of that nature? What are certain national things that you think could be done to help assist with that?
Um, so So I just want to be clear, like I am one who really, really believes in local politics. It's super important. But that is mostly because change can happen more quickly for things that there's local control for, right? But also, I do think that it's extremely important, like on a national level, that we are kind of having some of the same guidelines and practices, right? And so we look nationally at things that have not worked, or they have worked kind of as they were intended, to marginalize certain groups and keep certain groups down, right? So if we look at some of those practices on a national scale and develop those and kind of debunk any myths that these are good practices or the way that things should happen, I think that that would be phenomenal, right? So when you have that support on the federal level, it's a lot easier to pass things on the state and even the local level. So you mentioned things like policing. And when it comes to policing, there's a bunch of different things. So it would be good to have like a civilian review board, somebody outside of the agency to review things that are happening and making sure that any complaints are being heard. When it comes to cameras, right, there should be like a regular way that everyone is using and wearing their cameras. When it comes to like how you take someone down, or when to even use police force and violence, right? So like things like that on a national level, some guidance would be great so that we can implement what is needed here on a local level. So that's my opinion.
It's a great answer, and yeah, I think what you said about the local level really plays a huge part, because some things are harder to pass on a mass national scale than it is on a local level, and a local level could treat the issue more determining on what's going on in a certain area. So great answer. Thank you. Thanks. All right. So who would you say are some of your main influences for community activism?
Um, so of course my mother is always number one. Um, uh, she has always taught me to leave a place better than how you found it. So that's what I have strived to do my entire life, right? So you come into a place the way that it is. There are things that you might observe, there are things that people might tell you, and there are ways that you can make it better. And so I try to do that as best as possible. Assata Shakur, just the power, strength, and the resilience, especially right now, over the past couple of years, has been really, really helpful to me because of certain folks in the community who might be very hostile towards me or some of my positions in regards to lifting up people of color. It's just been good to kind of share that experience and know that I'm not the first one, I'm not the only one, and that I can persevere through it. So that has been really helpful for me past couple of years as well.
Okay. So it's good to hear that you mentioned your mother, and you have good personal experiences of prominent figures that you gain motivation from. So thank you for sharing that. So how do you deal with work in a Eurocentric society to make effective change for people of color? Now, what I mean by that is, how would you suggest that people of color, mainly Black people, work to adjust in this Eurocentric society or in a Eurocentric small town or city? What do they do to necessarily become successful and so forth? What do you think are some strategies that we can utilize?
Well, first I will say it's hard. It's very, very hard. So first acknowledge that, right? And second, I will say one thing that has been very helpful for me, similar to what I just spoke about with learning from others' experiences, find yourself kind of a brain trust, a group, someone who you can speak with. Because although we're talking about like your professional role, it still can get to a person emotionally, and that needs to be processed so that you can move forward in a positive way. I would also say that I look to a lot of my colleagues in other places, so not necessarily local, but other places who are going through the same things or have done the things that I wish to accomplish. So I kind of look to them as a model. Like, what's some good language around this policy, or what are some practices that have been beneficial in your local municipality? So again, that unity, that camaraderie, that sharing of information with other like-minded folks, that emotional support are things that have helped me through trying to make some change. And then also I will say, because I don't want to just make it seem like it's hard and it can't work. It can work. Again, perseverance. So my professional job, I work as a community engagement specialist. But through the years, I have made sure to lift up the voices of those in the community who I know are not in that room, and really share what their experience is. So my organization doesn't always do exactly what I have recommended to them, but I can see changes that have happened over the years directly from input that I have given to make sure that the most marginalized people, people of color, Black families, are getting these resources like they need.
Oh, wow. So that's a great way that you just put it, to have a seat at the table and make a change directly. So thank you for that answer. And we're going to head to the last question here. What do you think that it will take for Black people to unite more? Unity seems to always be a big issue in our community, backbiting and jealousy, and it happens in all communities, but in ours in particular, because of the circumstances, it tends to happen when it's more needed because of the circumstances. for us to be more united. So what do you think are some ways that we can work on being more united?
I mean, again, I don't have like a magic wand. I can't really say, but one of the approaches that I have taken over the years is to really be involved in the community and meet people where they're at, right? So I go to different people's functions, events. I utilize their businesses, and I build genuine relationships with them. Because that's the first key, right? You can't really have unity if you're saying, let's all come to the table and solve this problem. That's not where the work should have begun. It should have started, years ago before you needed someone, right? I have a friend and she has this saying, seek a friend before you need one, right? So it's building that relationship first, and then later on, the need might arise. So I think that that's really, really important. Another piece is to help to educate folks, right? You can't always know somebody else's experience, what they've been through, any traumas. You can't know that, right? So it's really important to share that with other people, so that they know where we're coming from, so that we can work together as best as possible. And then also on that note, it's really important for us to know the history, right? Why is it that we are going against one another? Why is it that we don't have the resources we need? And once we understand that, and once we have the relationship, then we can unite and build forces against those who are really holding us down, which is not one another. So that's what I would recommend.
Oh, wow, man. That's such a great answer. Corinne, I want to thank you for joining so much today. I think this is going to be very helpful for a lot of people. And I really appreciate your time, your wise words of wisdom, and everything that you offer to our community here in New York, in particular Binghamton. You're definitely a godsend. You volunteer a lot of your time, and we need more people like you. And so I'm thankful to interview you for this YouTube channel to kind of spread the good word of people like you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on today and letting me talk a little bit. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Corinne. I'll talk to you soon, and you have a great day.
Thank you, you too.
All right, peace.